Hi, my name's Mike Wilde. I'm the Chief Executive of Macc, which is Manchester's local voluntary and community sector and social enterprise support organisation. Our purpose is to encourage and support and develop local groups and organisations and individuals to have more influence over the places and communities in which they live. And obviously, one way of having more influence is having better access to information, so we've been looking at open data. One of the things we want to see is GPs and the council and the police and other decision makers that have an impact locally, like the lottery, sharing information about how they reach their decisions, which means sharing the data that they use to inform those decisions and telling us what decisions have been made. That was our initial reason for looking at this, but we also had a very practical reason. We get lots and lots of requests from colleagues, particularly in the local public sector, for data about our work. So, for example, our volunteer centre gets asked, how many volunteers are there in Harper Hay? How many community organisations are there in Moss Side? You can imagine, the sort of requests that we get. So, for a very pragmatic reason, we wanted to put our data out there and ask people to help themselves. It's simply a way of dealing with a huge number of requests that we can't meet. So, we contacted Stephen Flower, who many of you will know. He's on Twitter as Stevie, S-T-E-V-I-E-F-L-O-W, Stevie Flow, an expert on open data, and we asked him to do a number of things. We asked him to help us write a policy, to decide what data we could share and how we should share it, and to basically help us get that data online so that people could start using it. So we went through all the data that we collect during the course of our work. We weren't setting out to collect any new information. It was purely about the data that we already have and how we could make that useful for people. And we honed it down to a number of things. Numbers of volunteers in each ward of the city, the numbers of groups on our database in each ward in the city, an anonymised data set of our State of the Sector data from 2012, so that was a kind of economic survey of the voluntary and community sector and social enterprises across Manchester, looking at how much money they had coming in, what the focus of their work was, how many staff and volunteers, etc. We anonymised that and put that out as an open data set. And because we've been giving out grants on behalf of the local NHS recently, we decided that we would create an open data set around the grants programme. And that led us somewhere interesting because there is now a standard 360 giving, it's called, around grant data sets. So we started with trying to reach that standard around our grants information. One of the things I learned about open data as we were doing this work is the fact that it's building blocks. You don't release some huge, impenetrable data set. You release lots of smaller data sets which people can then stitch together in ways that they find useful. So, for example, in all our data about volunteers and community organisations and social enterprises, we've tied it to local wards. And in order to do that, we've used the ward codes from the Government Statistical Service, so that, if you like, there's a standardised reference point, which means that people can link other data sets to ours. One of the biggest impacts we've seen, apart from a reduction in the number of requests for data, because people can help themselves, is an increase in the number of requests for other people to tell us about how we did it. So that's partly why I'm recording this, so that to tell the story. But I think it's interesting that open data is still in its early stages. So perhaps by us doing this, we're encouraging more people to think about the data that they've got. And I think that as charities, community groups, social enterprises, anybody who is trying to make an influence or is funded through public money should be sharing the data that they're gathering, where it's appropriate, as they go along, because that's a way for you to create more influence. It's a way for you to give tools to other people to do interesting things. And I'll give you one particular example that kind of got me going on all this. I have not been able to find a data set which contains the addresses of all the GP practices in Manchester. That seems silly, doesn't it? All the information is publicly available. It's in the phone book. if anyone remembers those. It's on various websites. But it's never been gathered together into a data set that somebody who's building an app about where you can get support for your health in Manchester could use to power their app. And I think that's because we don't really think yet in terms of how to encourage other people to do stuff and to give them the tools to do it without necessarily giving them money. But there's social innovators out there who are looking for these data sets because they want to see what they can do with those. So we've put our marker down. We've said, here's the data that we gather. My challenge to you is, what data do you share and how are you sharing it?